Thank you to all my channel members, including my fan appreciation level members and my contributor level members, for helping support the YouTube channel. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Rhymer Hell by Gregory Frost. This is the third book in the Rhymer series. I reviewed the first book in the series a couple years ago, Rhymer. It's like an dark fantasy, dark fairy tale, historical fiction type book. And then I reviewed the second book last year, which was Rhymer Hood, which is continuing the same premise, except our main character, Thomas the Rhymer, has now assumed a new identity as Robin Hood. And so I reviewed that as well, enjoyed both of those books. Neither one is a stellar book, but I enjoyed both of them. And I also, by the way, interviewed the author Gregory Frost a couple years ago. So just look up Gregory Frost interview, Jonathan Cohn, you'll find it. It was great to talk to him. And so I've been following along with the series, so I decided to read the new book, the third book, as it came out. And, you know, it was originally billed as a trilogy, so I first thought this might be the final book in the series, but it was revealed that they are changing it from the Rhymer trilogy to the Rhymer series, because apparently the author wanted to do more than just 3 books to tie everything up. So I don't know if it's going to end up being a tetralogy of 4 books or a quintology or however many. I just know it's at least 3. And so we're getting the 4th book probably next year, I would assume. And so this is book 3, Rhymer Hell, and each book in the series has jumped forward in the timeline. The first book was set probably about the 1100s, maybe 1200s, and the second book was set 12 to 1300s in England. This book's set in the 1500s. It actually, surprisingly, follows the same pattern that Ken Follett's Kingsbridge series. You know, the first book, Pillars of the Earth, was in the 1100s. The second book was in the 1300s, World Without End, and then the third book, Column of Fire, was in the 1500s. So it's kind of funny that both books follow similar patterns there. And as I mentioned, this book is kind of dark fantasy fairy tale, but also historical fiction. And it's very equal amounts both. And what I'll say is that there were elements of both I liked, but this book, particularly in the second half of the book, becomes a third genre, and that is a thriller, like a spy thriller. And I just have to say, when it's fantasy and historical fiction, the book works really well. When it tried to be spy thriller, it just didn't work as well for me. So the basic premise of this book is that Nycnavin, who is the queen of the evil elves, the evil Yavags, she has sent her forces in to infiltrate parts of society to get their sacrifices for the elves, for their torture, for their enslavement, for their sacrifices, all this type of stuff. And so they are like inhabiting human bodies, taking over humanity and infiltrating humanity and stuff like that. It's really gross and terrible what she's doing. But they are currently being thwarted inadvertently, because how in previous books the way that the evil elves were able to become so powerful was because they infiltrated the clergy, and people trusted the clergy in the Catholic Church so much that they just kind of the Yavags were able to get all this stuff done. But in this book, this is about during the time of the Protestant Reformation, and so in the 1500s the Catholic Church is losing its power and the Protestants are on the rise. And in England specifically, Queen Elizabeth has very much allied herself with the Protestants. Queen Elizabeth didn't outlaw Catholicism or anything like that. She was very open to concepts of freedom of religion, but she was not, herself a Catholic or anything. And so, but she very much promoted Protestantism in her country. And a lot of people in this book, including people like Mary Queen of Scots, were not particularly happy with this. And so there's a lot of subterfuge where the plan is to try to kill Elizabeth, to try to kind of stop Protestantism in England so that the Yavags can gain their foothold. And one of Elizabeth's ministers who works for her is kind of her like spy master, and that is Walsingham. And Walsingham enlists the help of this man who seems to have good skills with archery, who we know him as Thomas the Rhymer. But he has so many names in this series. So many names that it's hard to keep up with all of them. And even in this book, he has so many names. That is one of the many problems I have, is that there's just too many names just for a single character. You gotta, I know why Gregory Frost is doing this with the character, but he needs to really hone in the names of everyone. All that being said, also there's way too many Thomases. Way too many Thomas, and the characters named Thomas in here. I know why they had to do it. Too many characters. So the book has that kind of spy thriller element, and the spy thriller has cool ideas, but the execution was kind of not exciting on the page. I really liked the premise that I just pitched. In reality, it's not the most exciting. But when you have our main character, Thomas the Rhymer, killing off the elves, when you see him going into hell, and or also known as Elfion, and fighting with the Yavog Queen and fighting with her soldiers and stuff, that's all great. And I loved that element of it, and I wish that was a bigger part of this book. And ironically, that was a part of the first couple books that I thought was weaker, and I thought it could have been used even more here. And the book title is Rhymer Hell, and it's, of course, it makes sense why they chose this title, because Elfion is important in this book, but you don't actually spend that much time. If you take the total page time spent in Elfion and in Hell in this book, you're talking maybe 50 to 60 pages out of a 300-page book. And so it just feels like it should have been retitled a little bit. I would have retitled the book one of two titles and kept the H theme, because the first book is Rhymer, and then the second book is Rhymer Hood, this book being Rhymer Hell. So they have an H title, subtitle going on with these. I would have renamed this either Rhymer Healer or Rhymer Hunt. Rhymer Healer, because in the first part of this book, Thomas the Rhymer is a healer of individuals. He's a doctor working in this infirmary that's trying to help out with patients who have the plague and stuff. I also could have called it Rhymer Hunt, because at different points, different characters are being hunted in this, including Rhymer himself is being hunted by the Yavogs. He's hunting the Yavogs, who are undercover, and with all the spy thriller stuff, Hunt would also work, because who's the most famous, one of the most famous spy characters in all of action movies? Ethan Hunt from the Mission Impossible. So I would have gone with that as the clever title, as Rhymer Hunt, instead of Rhymer Hell. Because while, as I said, Hell is important, it's not present a lot. And it feels like kind of poor marketing. I thought, he's going to be in Hell for most of the book. And that's not really the case. That being said, there's some really cool historical callbacks. There are several characters from 1500s England, like William Shakespeare makes a cameo in here, and as I said, Walsingham and Elizabeth all make cameos, and Mary Queen of Scots makes cameos, and there's a few others I won't spoil. But there's some cool, historical fiction elements here, and my favorite parts of this book were actually the female side characters who were around Thomas the Rhymer. In the first portion of the book, you had the character of Christiane, and in the second portion of the book, you had this new female character, which I'm not going to spoil anything for. I guess I can say her name. It's Sidoni. And so you have Christiane in the beginning, who is she's this woman who has been working in this brothel, and life is becoming just terrible there. And Rhymer, basically, as a doctor, ends up hiring her to do nothing so that he can just pay her, get her money to get her out of there, because she won't accept charity, but he pays her to work for him, and then she doesn't work for him. Anyway, it's really clever. And I loved their dynamic. I loved when he's on the run and he grabs her and they go on the run together. And I really liked the character Christiane, and I wish she had been present throughout the whole book, because when she was on the page, she was just delightful, and she brought a great different energy to the book. But then you also have, in the second half of the book, Sidoni, who I won't spoil who Sidoni is, but the dynamic that she has with Rhymer is just superb, and the action sequences that they have, particularly in Elfion, are just fantastic. So I really liked those two female characters, and they're not present the whole book. Again, they're each present. The first one's present in part of the beginning of the book, Christiane, and one of them is present in part of the end of the book, Sidoni, but it's not like they're present throughout. So I feel if they had been present throughout, it would have made the book much better. When it's the spy stuff, it just wasn't working for me, and I was bored out of my mind, if I'm being honest. But when it was the fantasy stuff, when they're going to Elfion, or when it's the historical stuff, when they're in 1500s England, just when you're seeing what 1500s England was like, it's so good. So you have these two opposite ends of superb elements and mind-numbingly boring elements. And it's really hard to square those two. Because how do you rate a book that is so opposite? Do you rate it well because of the good parts? Do you rate it terribly because of the bad parts? It's just really hard to do. And so I'm going to say that the stuff I liked outweighs the negative enough to push it into a positive rating. And I'm saying there's several scenes that were just incredible. The chapter where Christiane is introduced is an amazing chapter. The chapter near the end when they're in Elphion and stuff's revealed with Queen Nycnavin and Bragrender, just superb stuff there. So the highs of this book are incredibly high. Just know that the lows are incredibly low. I'm going to give the book a 7 out of 10, just like I gave the first two books. I enjoy the series. There's a lot of positives. There's also a lot of negatives. And it's not like a favorite series of mine, and it's also not one that I'm like pushing people to read necessarily, but what I'm saying is if you like dark fairy tale, because these elves are evil elves, they are like aliens that are like coming to body snatch and kill you. So it's the kind of a dark fantasy with historical fiction. And then, of course, this book adds in a bit of a spy element to it when Thomas the Rhymer has to go and start infiltrating the Catholics. And so while it has good elements, while it has bad elements, I'm giving it a 7. I enjoyed it as a whole, and I recognize what it is, but I will say that it is just know what you're going in with this series. So if you've read this series, let me know what you thought of the first two books, and if you've read this one, let me know what you think, and what recommendations do you have for someone that would enjoy this type of book. Until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.